In the quiet village of Nwanyoma, where the sun kisses the earth with a glow, there lived a woman named Adanna. She was the wife of Obinna, a man whose laughter was as hearty as the harvest and whose strength was the backbone of their family. Their home, a modest structure of mud bricks and palm thatch, stood as a testament to their love and toil. As the first light of dawn crept through the cracks of their bedroom, Adama stirred from her sleep. The room was adorned with hand-woven aquete cloths, the patterns telling stories of their ancestors. Obinna lay beside her, his breath shallow, his once robust frame now a shadow of its former self. Adana reached out, her hands trembling, to touch his forehead. It was as if he was being claimed by a fever that no herbs could cure. She whispered his name, a plea for him to stay, to fight the unforeseen foe that was stealing him away from her. The village healer had been in and out of their home, chanting incantations and offering potions, but the spirits seemed deaf to their plea. Adana knew that the battle was not in the physical realm. It was a journey that Obinna had to take alone. As the cock crowed, signaling the birth of a new day, Obinna's breath ceased, and a profound silence fell upon the room. Adana's heart shattered into a million pieces. Each shared a memory of their life together. The news of Obinna's passing spread through the village like a harmattan fire. Relatives and neighbors gathered, their faces etched with sorrow. Their whispers, a tapestry of grief and disbelief. Adana, now draped in the traditional mourning clothes of Abada, sat motionless, her eyes fixed on the doorway where Obinna would no longer enter. The women of the village encircled her, their presence a fortress against the storm of despair. The room, once filled with the echoes of laughter and love, was now a sanctuary of silence, save for the occasional sob and the comforting words of the elders. The walls, which had witnessed their life's joys and sorrows, stood as silent guidance of the love that had once flourished within them. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the earthen floor, Adana knew that her life had irrevocably changed. But in the depths of her sorrow, a flame of resolve flickered. She would not let her spirit be buried alongside Obinna. She would rise for him, for herself, and for the legacy they had built together. The sun rose over Nwanyoma, casting a warm light on the compound where Adana's home stood. The village was awake, the air filled with the sounds of mourning, children playing, chickens clucking, and the distant thuds of pencils against mortar. But within Adana's walls, the world stood at standstill, suspended in a state of mourning. Adana sat on a low stool, her figure shrouded in her Bada cloth, its deep black hue absorbing the sorrows that enveloped her. Her eyes, once bright with dreams, were now pools of grief. The women of the village, her sisters in spirit, had stayed by her side throughout the night, their sense of lamentation rising and falling like the breeze. As custom dictated, the men gathered outside, their discussions punctuated by solemn nods and occasional claps of hands. They spoke of Obinna, of his strength, his kindness, and the void his passing had left in the fabric of the community. The air was heavy with the scent of incense, burning in small clay pots around the room. It mingled with the aroma of fresh palm wine and the bitter leaves prepared for the morning ritual. The elders said that the scent will guide Obinna's spirit on its journey to the ancestors. Adanna's mother-in-law, Nneka, sat across from her, her face a mask of stoic acceptance. Tradition bore heavily upon her shoulders, the weight of generations dictating her every move. She had been through this before, had worn the black cloth, had felt the sting of loss. Yet her eyes held a glint of something unspoken, a knowledge that the days ahead will bring challenges none of them were prepared for. The ritual began with a pouring of libations, the liquid seeping into the earth as prayers were whispered to the heavens. Adanna's hands trembled as she accepted the calabash, her lips moving in silent supplication for Obinna's peaceful passage. As the day wore on, the house filled with visitors, each bringing their condolences and offerings. Their air was thick with words of comfort, but they fell on deaf ears. Adanna was adrift in a sea of memories, each one a reminder of the love she had lost. The setting sun cast long shadows across the compound, and the mourners began to disperse, their footsteps a soft echo on the path. The night will bring solitude, and with it the first whispers of the storm that was brewing on the horizon. Adanna knew that the coming days would test her, that the traditions of her people would clash with the desires of her heart. But in the depth of her mourning, she found a speck of defiance. She would not be broken by custom or by the greed of those who sought to claim what was not theirs. The morning sun had barely risen above the horizon when the compound of the late Obinna began to stir with activities. Today was the day his will would be read, a day that tradition held high in regard. It was a time when the living spoke for the dead, and the dead, through their last testament, shaped the future of the living. Adanna watched from the doorway of her home as relatives, close and distant, filed into her compound. The men were wearing flowing agbada robes, their colors vibrant against the backdrop of the village. The women were adorned in jet wrappers, their heads wrapped in matching scarves, their movements graceful and deliberate. The air was filled with hushed conversations and the occasional clinks of kola nuts being exchanged, a sign of respect and unity among the Igbo people. Adanna's heart raced with anticipation and dread. She knew that Obinna had loved her, had promised to protect her even in death, but she also knew that the power of tradition and the greed that it could awaken in men's hearts. The family gathered under the Iroko tree, its massive branches providing shade and a sensational ancestral presence. The lawyer, a man from the city with a reputation for fairness, arrived with a will in hand, sealed with Obinna's family crest. As the will was read, Adanna felt the world around her grow silent. Obinna had left everything to her, the house, the land, the livestock. It was an unprecedented act, a deviation from the norm where property often passed to the male lineage. A murmur rippled through the crowd, a wave of disbelief and discontent. Adanna's brother-in-law, Uzodinma, stood up, his face contorted with anger. "This is not our way," he bellowed. "A woman cannot inherit a man's wealth. It is against our traditions." The lawyer held up his hand, calling for calm. Obinna was clear in his wishes, he said firmly. He believed in his wife's strength and her right to continue the legacy they built together. The tension was palpable, the air thick with unspoken threats and the stirring of conflicts. Adanna stood, her back straight, her eyes meeting those of every man and woman who dared challenge her. She was no longer just a widow. She was a woman with rights bestowed upon her by her husband's love and trust. Adanna returned to her home, the will clutched in her hands like a shield. She knew that the battle of her inheritance was just beginning, but she was ready to fight, to honor Obinna's memory, and to forge a new path for the women of Nwanyoma. The days following the reading of Obinna's will were fraught with tension. Whispers spread like wildfire through Nwanyoma, carrying with them a mix of admiration and disapproval of Adanna's unprecedented inheritance. The women of the village looked upon her with new eyes, seeing not just a widow, but a light of change, a challenge to the status quo. Adanna, however, found little time for reflection. Her in-laws, led by Uzodinma, had wasted no time in contesting Obinna's will. They claimed it was a forgery, a trick, an affront to their customs. They demanded that the property be redistributed according to traditional laws, which favored the male relatives. The compound became a battlefield, with Uzodinma and his supporters arriving each day to claim pieces of Adanna's life. They took the goats, the chickens, even the yam band that stood as a symbol of Obinna's hard work. With each item they carried away, Adanna felt as though they were erasing the life she and Obinna had built together. But Adanna was not alone in her fight. The women of Nwanyoma, who had long suffered in silence under similar circumstances, rallied around her. They came each day, a colorful procession of solidarity, their voices raised in song and protest. They wore their George wrappers and coral beads, not just as adornment, but as armor against injustice they faced. The elders of the village were divided. Some sympathized with Adanna, moved by her plight and Obinna's clear wishes. Others sided with Uzodinma, bound by tradition and the fear of change. The village square became an arena of debate, a place where the future of Nwanyoma's customs was contested. Adanna stood firm, her resolve unshaken even as she watched her home being stripped bare. She knew that the fight was about more than just property. It was about dignity, about the rights of women, about the legacy she will leave for her daughters and the daughters of Nwanyoma. Adanna, sitting in her now sparsed living room, the walls bare, the floor swept clean of the life that once filled it. In her hands, she held a deed to the land, a piece of paper that had become a symbol of her struggle. She looked out of the window at the setting sun and whispered a vow to herself and to Obinna's memory. She would not give up. she will not give in. In the heart of Nwanyoma, beneath the ancient Udala tree, the women of the village gathered. Their faces were etched with determination, their voices a chorus of unity. They had come together for Adanna, for themselves, and for the future of their daughters. Adanna stood among them, her presence commanding despite the simplicity of her attire. She had shed the Abada cloth, choosing instead a vibrant Ankara fabric that spoke of life and resilience. Her eyes, once dulled by grief, now burned with a desire that drew the women to her. "We cannot let this stand," she declared, her voice rising above the rustles of leaves. "Our customs are important, but they should not be chains that bind us to injustice." The women nodded, their murmurs of agreement weaving a tapestry of solidarity. They spoke of their own losses, of lands taken and voices silenced. They shared memories of their mothers and grandmothers who had enjoyed the same fate, their legacies erased by the greed of men. The air was charged with the energy of change, the Udala tree bearing witness to the birth of a movement. The women formed a plan, a strategy that would take them to the doors of the village council, to the very heart of Nwayoma's governance. Adanna would lead them, her case the catalyst for their cause. They would demand recognition, not just as widows and daughters, but as rightful heirs and custodians of their families' futures. The women dispersed, each returning to her home with a new sense of purpose. The night fell on Nwanyoma, but the darkness was pierced by the light of hope, a light that promised a dawn of equality and respect. The dawn of a new day in Nwanyoma brought with it a sense of anticipation. The village council, a revered body of elders and titled men, had called for a meeting. The agenda was clear: to address the growing unrest stirred by Adanna's inheritance and the women's rallying cry for change. Adanna prepared for the council meeting with meticulous care. She chose to wear a traditional Isiagu top, its lion motif symbolizing strength and authority. Her head was adorned with a matching coral bead crown, a silent testament to her status as Obinna's widow and the matriarch of her household. The council's meeting place was at the village square, an open space flanked by ancient trees and the communal obi. As Adanna approached, she could feel the weight of countless eyes upon her. The air was thick with whispers and the subtle scent of palm oil from the nearby market. The elders sat in a semicircle, their faces impassive, their attire a mix of richly dyed Okara cloth and red caps signifying their titles. At the head of the semicircle was the Igwe, the traditional ruler of Nwanyoma, his regalia a tapestry of history and power. Adanna was given a stool of honor, a stool slightly apart from the council, facing the assembly. She sat with her back straight, her gaze unyielding. Beside her stood a group of women, their presence a silent show of solidarity. The Igwe spoke first, his voice a deep rumble that echoed across the square. "We are here to discuss the matter of Obinna's will and the unrest that it has caused," he began. "Our traditions are the pillars of our society, but we must listen to the voices of our people." One by one, the elders spoke. Their opinion as varied as the patterns of their okara cloth. Some argued for the preservation of tradition, for the sanctity of the male lineage as the custodians of property. Others, swayed by the changing winds, spoke of justice and the need to honor Obinna's wishes. Adanna listened, her heart a drumbeat of hope and fear. When it was her turn to speak, she rose, her voice clear and steady. I stand before you not just as a widow, but as a member of this community, she said. Obinna's will was his voice from beyond, a call for us to see the worth of women, to recognize our contributions, our rights. The council murmured, the weight of our words settling upon them like a mantle. The Igwe nodded slowly, his eyes reflecting the complexity of the decision before him. The Igwe called for a recess, a time for reflection and counsel. Adanna stepped down from her stool, her spirit buoyed by the support of the women who encircled her. The battle was far from over, but the council's call had been a step toward a future where tradition and equality could coexist. As the village of Mwayoma settled under the cloak of night, the whispering winds carried tales of the day's meeting. In the huts and by the firesides, the story of Adanna's courage rippled through the hearts of the villagers, igniting conversations long overdue. Adanna herself sat in the quiet of her home, the moonlight casting a soft glow on the earthen walls. The council's words echoed in her mind, a cacophony of tradition and the change. She knew that the Igwe's decision would not come lightly, for he held the power to alter the very fabric of their society. In the stillness, Adanna found solace in the memories of Obinna. She recalled his gentle teachings, the way he spoke of the world beyond Nwanyoma, a world where women stood shoulder to shoulder with men. He has envisioned a future where the daughters would walk a path paved with the same opportunities as sons. The night deepened, and Adanna's resolve strengthened. She will not let the winds of change pass her by. She will harness them, ride them to a future where her story will be a light for others. Adanna stepped outside, the cool breeze caressing her skin. She looked up at the stars, those ancient watchers, and made a silent vow. She will fight, not just for herself, but for all the women of Nwanyoma. The whispering winds, once a harbinger of sorrow, now carried a promise of hope. If this story has touched your heart, please consider supporting us by following us or subscribing and sharing this video. Your support allows us to bring more stories of hope and healing to the world. Thank you.